The lead up to the robbery of a Brinks facility in the north end of Boston, Massachusetts on January 17, 1950, took almost 3 years of meticulous planning and careful surveillance. Oh, and for some reason, way too many people. And that, my friends, would end up being their downfall. As you'll soon see, the more people involved, the harder it is to keep a secret. Two can keep a secret if one of them is dead. Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. Like any good story, we must start at the beginning with a guy named Fats. The mastermind, a career criminal with a keen eye for opportunity and just enough arrogance to think he could pull off the perfect crime. He was an experienced Boston criminal. And one fateful afternoon in 1947, while walking in the North End, he noticed an inconspicuous brick building at 165 Prince Street. It turns out that it wasn't inconspicuous at all. It was a Brinks security facility, and that meant one thing: cash. Lots and lots of cash. Most of you probably know Brinks from those armored trucks, but it's been around for way longer than the trucks. It was founded in 1859 by Perry and Fidelia Brink of Chicago, Illinois. Its business has evolved from local armored transportation services, pre-trucks, horse and buggy, to providing corporate and financial logistics and international secure transportation. Oh, and also, you might have a Brinks security system in your house. It's the same company. Once Fats noticed what he thought would be his next target in that Brinks depot on Prince Street, he also figured out that this was a great potential score because of some targeted surveillance. The door security? Lax. The employee routines? Predictable. And Fats had just enough swagger and enough connections to start to plan a heist. First, he would need a crew. He was a mastermind after all, but he needed some dudes with some very specific skills. So he gathered a big crew together, which included the following dudes. Joseph Specs O'Keefe and Stanley Gusciora were experts in safecracking and burglary. Adolph Jazz Maffey and Vincent Costa would be primed to handle the getaway logistics. Michael Geegan, Henry Baker, and James Faherty would be the muscle, because of course you need muscle. And because they weren't wizards, they needed information about what the inside of the facility looked like. So Fats recruited Thomas McGinnis, who had previously worked for Brinks, and he provided critical knowledge of the layout of the building. From the beginning, the guys agreed to a strict code of silence. Oh, well, more on that strict part later. For 2 years, the gang held extensive stakeouts outside the Brinks depot. 2 years. They watched for all the security measures, shift changes, and how the cash was handled. At one point, they realized that the employees often left a side door unlocked before closing time. Fats and Specs even stole a Brinks truck to study its layout and figure out how cash was transported. In late 1949, Fats arranged for a trusted contact to get inside the depot, and over a period of several months, the robbers removed each lock from the building and had a key made for it using wax impressions before returning the lock. The gang also built an exact replica of the Brinks lock mechanism to practice unlocking the lock quickly. Safecracking and burglary experts, Specs and Stanley, posed as delivery men to gain access to Brinks and study their alarm system. The theft was originally intended to be a burglary rather than an armed robbery, but even Specs and Stanley could not find a way around the building's burglar alarm. So they decided they would have no choice but to make this a live event. At the same time, the men determined that disguises were going to be crucial to their victory, so they ordered rubber masks that were actually supposed to be Captain Marvel, but I can tell you right now, they were the absolute worst possible likeness of Captain Marvel. They also managed to get inside the building multiple times and practiced the entry and exit strategy. They made these timed runs to make sure that they would be able to complete the whole heist in under 15 minutes. The security was real lax at this place, I guess. They stole 2 vehicles for their getaway, a truck to carry away the loot and a car, which they would use to block anyone pursuing them after the robbery. They decided to do the heist on a Tuesday night, January 17th. On Tuesdays, cash deposits were at their highest because business transactions piled up over the weekend. They decided to enter the building around 7, as the vault would still be open, but in the evening there were less guards on duty. The whole gang gathered the night before, on January 16th, at a safe house. They rehearsed the plan one more time, reviewed each man's role, and all the backup plans. Before we get to January 17th, let's drink. Remember, you can always spot the ingredients and a recipe for the cocktail and mocktail in the description box. You already know. Today's drink is aptly named the Midas Touch because these guys certainly had the Midas Touch, at least for a while. If you didn't know, King Midas, a king in Greek mythology, was given the power to turn anything he touched into gold. The Midas Touch drink is a bourbon orange liqueur and honey delight. Garnish with gold flakes if you are as fancy as me. I'm just kidding. I'm not fancy. I didn't get any gold flakes. Drink up. And remember, snitches get stitches. They do not get riches. Around 7:10 p.m. on January 17th, 1950, a cold and dark night, getaway guy Vincent, the group's lookout, signaled with a flashlight from a nearby rooftop when he saw the vault being opened. I guess he saw through a window or something. The security's so lax at this place. The security people. Anyway, 7 men armed with .38 caliber rifles entered the Brinks depot through the unlocked side door. They were wearing navy peacoats, chauffeur caps, and those absolutely terrifying rubber masks, as well as gloves and shoes with soft rubber soles. The robbers did little talking. They moved with studied precision and opened at least 3 and possibly 4 locked doors to gain entrance to the second floor of Brinks, where 5 employees were behind the mesh fencing, engaged in their nightly chore of checking and storing the money collected from Brinks customers that day. The men were surprised and probably terrified, and not just because of the masks, though that would have been enough by itself if you ask me. But they saw those guns and decided to smartly just give the armed men exactly what they wanted. The gang forced the employees to lie face down on the floor and then tied their hands up behind their backs with rope and put tape over their mouths. As the crew stuffed the loot into bags and stacked them near the exit, a buzzer suddenly went off. The gang froze. That buzzer meant someone was trying to get into the vault area. Quickly, they ripped the tape off of one of the employees' mouths and demanded answers. Turns out it was just a garage attendant at the door. 2 of the robbers moved in, ready to grab him, but then they saw him walk away, seemingly oblivious to what was happening. Not seemingly. He was definitely had no idea. Relieved, they let him go and got back to the job, knowing they had just dodged a major bullet, I guess. Avoiding triggering alarms, the robbers loaded $2.775 million in cash, checks, and securities into bags and fled in a stolen truck, as well as the 4 revolvers from the guards. In 15 minutes, they had taken the equivalent of $36.39 million current dollars out of the building and escaped. No one was injured. By 7:37 p.m., one of the Brinks employees managed to free himself and raise the alarm. Immediately, the Boston PD calls in the FBI, and yes, it was J. Edgar Hoover's FBI, and together they launched a massive investigation. But they didn't have much to go on. There was almost no physical evidence, aside from one cap that had been left behind and the tape and rope used to bind the employees. The men were wearing those terrifying masks too, so the employees didn't know what they looked like. Most of the cash stolen was in 1s, 5s, 10s, and 20s, which made it nearly impossible to trace the bills through serial numbers. Any information police could get from their informants initially proved useless. The truck that the robbers had used was found cut to pieces in Stoughton, Massachusetts, near Speck's home. In February, 2 of the 4 revolvers were recovered after being found by a group of boys who were playing on a sandbar at the edge of the Mystic River in Somerville. But that was really it in terms of physical evidence. Remember, the robbers had their strict pact of silence. They also made an agreement to stockpile the money and not spend it. For how long? I'm so glad you asked. I'd love to tell you. The statute of limitations on this type of crime was 6 years. So the ultimate plan was to keep those lips zipped and the money unspent. And it worked. For 5 years, the investigation stalled, revealing nothing, despite the fact that the FBI relentlessly questioned known criminals, informants, and former Brinks employees. One Massachusetts racketeer, a career criminal with a moral code shaped by years in the underworld, didn't mince words when talking to investigators. He told them, quote, "If I knew who pulled the job, I wouldn't be talking to you now because I'd be too busy trying to figure a way to lay my hands on some of the loot," end quote. Brinks Incorporated offered a $100,000 or $2.25 million 2025 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those involved in the robbery, with an additional 5% of any recovered cash offered by the insurance company. J. Edgar fully took over supervision of the investigation. And still, nothing. There were hundreds of dead ends, mostly from tips sent by well-meaning and also money-seeking Americans. The Brinks case was front-page news, after all. It was one of the most daring and meticulously planned heists in American history at that point. A citizen in California suggested that the loot might be concealed in the Atlantic Ocean near Boston. There were reports of a man in Bayonne, New Jersey, who was suddenly flashing cash, hitting nightclubs, buying new cars, and living large. Ex-cons came forward claiming they'd overheard jailhouse talk about the Brinks job. Investigators followed up on every lead, hoping for a break. But in the end, none of it led anywhere. Just more dead ends in a case already full of them. Well, as we all know, the only ship that won't sail is a partnership. Specs would become the problem child. By mid-1950, trouble was already brewing for two members of the Brinks gang. In June, Specs and Stanley were arrested in Pennsylvania for an unrelated burglary. Specs got 3 years in county jail, while Stanley was hit with a 5 to 20-year sentence in a state penitentiary. All these dudes had to do was stay out of trouble for 6 years, and they couldn't even stay out of trouble for 6 months. From behind bars, Specs and Stanley sent word to their old partners in Boston, Fats and Inside Man Thomas. The two demanded money to fight their convictions. Specs, in particular, felt he was entitled to it. He was the safe-cracking expert, after all. He would even argue that he was the mastermind behind the whole thing. But Specs' cut to the Brinks loot mostly vanished. The FBI saw an opportunity. Agents tried to pressure Specs and Stanley into talking, but both men played dumb, refusing to admit any connection to the Brinks heist. Meanwhile, law enforcement kept a close eye on the rest of the guys in the gang, hoping someone would crack. I guess they suspected it might have been them or some of them. The closest they got was convicting getaway guy Jazz Maffey, but not for the robbery. Instead, he got 9 months for tax evasion. It's always tax evasion, isn't it? Things really escalated once Specs got out of prison. He was immediately arrested again on a separate burglary and parole charges, but managed to post his $17,000 bail. At this point, he was desperate. He claimed he'd never actually seen his share of the loot after handing it off to Jazz for safekeeping. So what did he do? He kidnapped the other getaway guy, Vincent, and demanded his money back. I don't know how or why he thought that would work. Anyway, that was the last straw for Fats. Rather than pay up, he decided to get rid of Specs altogether. After a couple of failed murder attempts, Fats brought in a hired gun, notorious hitman Elmer Trigger Burke. Trigger tracked Specs down in Boston and shot him, but Specs survived. And that's when everything was already unraveling, but that's when it completely fell apart. Lying in his hospital bed, the FBI came a-knocking, and this time Specs was ready to talk. Before the robbery was committed, the participants had agreed that if anyone muffed, which I guess means snitched, he would be taken care of. I think you know what that means. Specs felt that most of the gang members had muffed. Talking to the FBI was his way of taking care of them all. On January 6, 1956, he gave them everything they needed. Just 6 days before the statute of limitations ran out, the FBI arrested 6 members of the gang, including Fats, Inside Man Thomas, Getaway Guy Vincent, and other Getaway Guy Jazz. A few months later, they caught 2 more of the muscle guys. The trial began on August 6, 1956, and by the end of it, 8 gang members were sentenced to life in prison. Most were paroled by 1971, except for Inside Man Thomas, who died behind bars. Specs got 4 years and was out by 1960. Authorities only recovered $58,000 of the $2.7 million in stolen money. The rest has never been found. Specs later teamed up with writer Bill Considine to tell his side of the story in the book The Men Who Robbed Brinks, because hey, if you can't keep the money, might as well tell the story, right? Thanks for hanging out with me. I have not read Specs' book because, maybe we shouldn't be profiting off of crimes we've committed. I don't know. Plus, to snag a copy, it would have cost me over $60. I'll let you decide which of those was my primary deciding factor. If you're not following me on social media, it would be really great if you did. And even more great if you would recommend my podcast to some new listeners or viewers. Some people have been doing that for me recently, and it makes my face the emoji with the tears in the eyes. You know which one I'm talking about. Anyway, and you know who you are. Thank you. Next week, a story with a criminal with a heart and a bittersweet pineapple margarita to sip while listening to an equally wistful story. Don't forget to pick up the ingredients to make the drink. I'll see you next week, and remember, snitches get stitches. They don't get the riches.